Oh, Captain, my Captain! What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, this time, do get the win, which justifies the excited start to the video. 5-4 in the shootout in a much more exciting game than what I was expecting from Kraken versus Wild, especially considering the reputation that, well, I guess the Wild have been a little bit more exciting since Kaprizov came into the league, but either way, it was a very fun game, back and forth the whole way, and the Kraken only had the lead once, and it's when the game ended. Not only that, it featured a franchise first, even if a bit of a niche one, as well as something the Kraken didn't do even once all of last season. In fact, it's something that every other team in the NHL did last season except the Kraken. Yes, even the Sharks managed to have a multi-goal comeback to end up winning a game. The Kraken were the only team last year to not do that, and here we are, 2 games into the next season, and they've already managed to have a multi-goal comeback and win the game. I mean, they did at least force overtime a couple times last year, but still ended up losing in overtime each time they did that, and it was not very frequently. So at the very least, if you are looking for things to feel optimistic about this season being better than last season, even if that first game was frustrating because, well, they let the exact opposite happen to them in giving up a multi-goal lead and then not even getting the loser point out of it by forcing overtime, at least they managed to do something they didn't do last season, and it was a positive thing. And if you still need even more reason to be optimistic about this season after this game, I think Brandon Montour gave us that in this one. But we'll get to that. Before we get to that and the game itself, though, there is one other piece of big Kraken news that happened between the last game and this one in the 3-day gap between games 1 and 2, and that was the big re-sign of Joey Daccord. He gets $5 million for the next 5 years. Of course, this kicking in next season, he'll still be making what he was already going to get paid this season, but Daccord extended for the long term for the Kraken, so it looks like they are looking at him as the starting goaltender once that Grubauer contract comes to an end, with the assumption that they won't be extending Grubauer once his contract does end. And normally I would have done a whole separate video on this just by itself, but I didn't quite have the time to pull it together. Things have been a little bit busy with 2 kids and one starting preschool and all that. Anyway, the point is some quick thoughts on the Joey extension. First off, Joey Daccord is one of my favorite Kraken players. He's a great guy, very easy to root for, and not only that, had a great season last year, especially that stretch in the middle that kind of got the Kraken back into things before eventually they fell back out, but was a big part of that stretch in late December, early January, obviously the Winter Classic. We all love Daccord. This is definitely a risky signing. As much as Daccord has played well in his time in the NHL, has been fairly limited. It's not a huge sample size, so to go off of what he's already had in the NHL and then give him that much money over that much term, especially with how unpredictable goaltending can be, yeah, it is a bit of a risk. And we have seen, even in somewhat recent history, goaltenders that have had similar good starts to their career in the first less than 100 games get signed to even somewhat similar deals, and it go either way. Sometimes it works out and you end up getting a steal for the last couple of years as the goaltender really comes into his own, and sometimes that variability of goaltending makes the deal not look quite as good. Either way, obviously we'll be hoping that this one does look good in a few years, and as far as my take on that, I think ultimately I like the chances that this risk will pay off for the Kraken, but again, there's no denying that signing a goaltender to this much term and this much money is going to be a risk, especially with less than 100 games under his belt at the NHL level. Either way, though, of course, we're going to have to wait until about a year from now to see Daccord play his first game under that new contract, but we got to see him play his first game of this season on his still current contract in this game against the Wild, of course, with Grubauer then going to play the other half of the back-to-back in Dallas. And for Daccord's part, they got off to a pretty good start. It was a back-and-forth game early on, both goaltenders making the saves they needed to. Nothing particularly high danger other than one shot from McCann that came from around the faceoff dot that Fleury was able to see coming and make that save. Unfortunately for the Kraken, around the middle part of the first period, things started to unravel a bit defensively, at least in bits and pieces, and those bits and pieces ended up mattering. Well, at least one of them did anyway. At least at first, Daccord was up to the task, actually making a couple of pretty nice saves to keep things scoreless, but eventually it was one grade A chance too many for the Wild, and it ends up being, of course, Kaprizov from behind the Kraken net who finds Zuccarello in the slot. And although there are 2 Kraken players around Zuccarello, it's Cartier and Tanev. Cartier's, well, actually both of them are in front of and behind Zuccarello respectively, but on his offside while his stick is wide open to take the shot, so Kaprizov puts it on his stick, puts it on the tape, and Zuccarello fires it into the net before Decourt has much of any chance to react, and just like that, it's 1-0. So it wasn't necessarily that he was completely wide open, but certainly Cartier, I think, could have been a little bit more positioned to his stick side to at least have a chance to intercept that pass, especially with already a couple of guys honed in on what was happening behind the net. Not the best defense, but not the worst that we would see in this game. From there, the Wild really did control the rest of the first period throughout the entire back half of it. They also get 2 power plays, or 1.5. The first one, the Kraken are able to kill off relatively easily. I mean, the Wild do get a couple of shots. Decourt comes up with a save. One might even have gone off of a post in out, so maybe I shouldn't say easily, but the Kraken do survive that one. And they do survive the first few seconds of a power play that the Wild get right at the end of the period. So we go to the first intermission with the Kraken just down 1-0, but as we start the second period, the Wild have the rest of that power play to go, and with about 30 seconds left in it, once again, a bit of a lapse defensively, or maybe just some lazy defense, allows Matt Boldy to just kind of walk right up into the high slot and fire off a shot, which catches Decourt a bit off guard. He kind of pump faked him once. He had all the time and space he wanted, since I think in particular Tanev didn't even try to go up to challenge him. He just kind of lets Boldy just skate in front of him from one side to the other. Boldy fires off that shot, and I have to say, even with some lazy penalty killing in front of him, this is one that Decourt absolutely should have had. It squeaks through his armpit, bounces up in the air, and ends up in the net behind him. So definitely a soft one. This is one that Decourt, of any of them, would want back. He had every chance in the world to make the save. Still a shot that should not have been that easy and open to take in the first place. Either way, though, still now very early in the second period, even earlier than the Kraken had their 2-0 lead against the Blues. It's 2-0 the other way with the Wild leading. Fortunately, like that game against the Blues, the Kraken were not going to go away from being down 2-0. Although it was the Blues coming back in that game, but regardless, the Kraken respond very quickly back the other way. We're still inside the first 2 minutes. In fact, less than a minute after the ensuing faceoff, the Kraken have the puck and are headed back down toward the Wild end of the ice, trying to respond quickly. It's McCann with the puck as he gets it from Montour, as Eberle and Wright, who took over this line. It was the Beniers line, now it's the Wright line. Beniers and Wright switching for at least this game. We'll see if that ends up sticking after how this game went. I probably think it will. Either way, Eberle and Wright kind of go on either side of the defense. Wright actually manages to get behind his guy. McCann just kind of waits for them to get towards the net, then fires off a shot between two players, which he didn't quite get everything on, and I don't think that was really his intent. I mean, sure, he gave it a little bit of a good, fire at the net, but still not quite everything that we know McCann has in that shot. Either way, the point of this shot was just to get the puck to the net and try to get maybe some kind of rebound. Maybe something good happens. Either Eberle or Wright can get to the net front first and pick up that rebound and try and score from there. And in fact, that's just what ends up happening. Wright gets to it first, but the rebound goes out to the other side where Eberle shows up. Eberle crashing in as Fleury isn't able to handle it. Marc-Andre Fleury in net for the Wild. And Eberle just kind of whacks at it a couple of times. Fleury ends up in the net, and the puck's still loose, so there's no whistle. And Eberle manages to slam that puck across the line, getting his 300th goal of his career, and first as the captain of the Kraken, or just a captain in the NHL in general. Obviously, then Eberle picks up his first of the season as McCann and Montour get their first assists. Montour his first point as a Kraken. McCann his first assist of the season, but he wasn't done there for this game. Well, he actually was done there as far as assists are concerned. This was his only assist of the game, but we'll get to that. The point is the Kraken from here still really aren't able to get, I would say, overwhelming momentum. They're at least able to kind of even things back up and maybe have a slight edge. It certainly wasn't a dominating play from either side at this point, so in that way, things were going better than the back half of the first period. And eventually, the Kraken end up getting their first power play of the game. A power play that I gotta say they never should have had. It ends up being a tripping call on Brodin, I want to say, from the Wild. And, yeah, there's just no way around the fact this is one of the worst calls that I've seen in the 4 years of the Kraken. I mean, at the very least, it's certainly the worst call that I can at least ever remember going in Seattle's favor in the 3 years and 2 games now that they've been playing in the NHL. and I'm sure you can probably find a replay of it, at least for the next couple of days somewhere. I know it was around the top of the hockey subreddit, so shouldn't be too hard to find. But yeah, Brodin has the puck, or at least, I mean, he certainly has possession of the puck in front of the Kraken bench, and he's basically standing completely still along the boards as he tries to corral the puck and gain full control of it, while also kind of pinning it against the boards to make sure he keeps possession of it as Tanev comes in to try and take the puck from him. Tanev comes in, does try to get the puck, but really only ends up getting Brodin's legs, taking Brodin's legs out from under him as Tanev goes past with Tanev's sticks. So yeah, either way, Brodin's feet go up in the air and do end up kind of clipping Tanev. Looks like one of his skates might have gotten Tanev in the face. It didn't really look like it got him very badly, but Tanev holds his face and goes to the ice as well with his feet coming out from under him. And somehow they decide that that was Brodin tripping Tanev. So somehow, yeah, Brodin, with the puck, standing still, tripped Tanev, whose feet, he kind of took his own feet out as he went to hold his face after getting hit by a skate, which is understandable, but again, the only reason there were skates in the air for Tanev to get hit by in the first place is because he kind of forced those skates to go in the air by missing the puck with his stick and hitting Brodin's legs. So anyway, through all of that, Brodin goes to the box for tripping Tanev, and Tanev goes to the bench to get patched up from getting hit by a skate. And look, sometimes with plays like this where two guys go to the ice and they're fighting over a puck, you can maybe see what a ref might have seen in live action, or even if you slow it down on the replay, get a couple of angles, you can kind of see where a ref might have been coming from. Even if it's a bad call, you can kind of make sense of what they saw that led to that bad call. There was no replay that they showed, at very least on the broadcast, that even hinted a possibility that this call could have gone on Brodin. Again, he clearly had possession of the puck, so he can't be the one that's tripping the other player, and he was the one that got tripped. So if anything, Tanev could have gotten called for tripping here and gone to the box. But in the end, the Wild had already had 2 power plays, I guess, and the Kraken hadn't had any. They decided to make a call, and, well, sometimes you just have to say you take it. Anyway, officiating aside, even if it was a bad, really, really bad call, for Seattle's part in all this, they didn't do anything wrong. They get a chance to take advantage of it now, and granted, there probably are a lot of people in that arena and all around Minnesota wearing green jerseys that are assuming Seattle has someone on payroll in the stripes for this game. But if you're that official, you're just hoping that Minnesota can kill this off and no harm, no foul, as long as it doesn't lead to anything that changes the outcome of the game, let's say. For Seattle, though, unfortunately for the official, but fortunately for the Kraken, on this power play, the Kraken get right to business and start firing shot after shot after shot on net and getting some pretty dangerous looks. One of the better power plays the Kraken have had in, well, a very, very long time. The power play was not very good last year, but it's a dangerous one. Good chances. Fleury makes a couple nice saves. McCann puts one off of a post. But eventually, it is McCann from the other side, the side he isn't usually shooting from, that fires one just wide of the net. But he put it intentionally wide of the net because standing on the back door is Jordan Eberle with his 2 skates and his stick making a wall. McCann, like he's playing pool, puts it right off one of the skates of Eberle and into the net to give the Kraken the power play goal. Eberle his 2nd of the game and his 301st of his career. And it admittedly a goal that would only make Wild fans even more upset, not only because it came off of that horrendous call and it ties the game, but also because, especially after that horrendous call, it would not be hard to convince yourself that Eberle kicked this puck in. Now, I will say, while I can forgive Wild fans for thinking that Eberle kicked this puck in, as far as the rule is concerned, or at least the way that it's typically officiated, this was definitely more of a deflection into the net. That having been said, I mean, you can ask any Kraken fan over the last 3 years, we're as confused as anybody as to what the heck a kick into the net is. Yeah, who knows? I would say this one did look more like a deflection, at least as far as what we've seen in games with the Kraken. There have been things much more like kicking motions that have led to goals and been upheld that have gone against the Kraken. Either way, the way this goal goes in and the way the Kraken get this power play only serves to further and further upset Wild fans, and it seemed like the Wild as well, as they really started to get physical after this. Of course, it didn't help that Eriksson Ek ran his face into Larsson's elbow a little bit before the horrendous call and left the game, and came back for a little bit, but then ended up leaving again. So hopefully Eriksson Ek is okay. And that one, I know Wild fans, or at least some Wild fans, were also upset that that didn't draw a call. But the replay's pretty obvious. Larsson just has his elbow up in the air as he's trying to work the puck along the boards behind the Kraken net. And Eriksson Ek just kind of runs his face right into the point of Larsson's elbow. I don't know if he was thinking that it would buckle or what, but yeah, he didn't get the better end of that. So hopefully Eriksson Ek is okay. That one, though, definitely was not anything wrong with what Larsson did on the play. And it also certainly didn't help when, even after all that, after the Kraken score the game-tying goal, and not long after they score that game-tying goal off of the horrible call after Eriksson Ek leaves the game, Eberle and Marcus Johansson going in opposite directions. I don't think either one really saw the foot of the other. They end up colliding feet, and both of them end up spinning and awkwardly going to the ice. But it's Johansson who gets the worst of it. He ends up going to the locker room as well. And of course, that only makes things worse. And definitely, I would say, escalated things as far as the physicality of this game, as the Wild clearly were out for a pound of flesh for at least the rest of the second period. And honestly, after all that, you can hardly blame them. Sure, I think when you cool down after all of it, in hindsight, really only that one call, the one that was the tripping call on Brodin, was horrendously, horribly wrong. But it was so bad that then everything else that's even mildly borderline also gets kind of lumped in with that being a bad call. So everything seems worse when you have one call as bad as that one was. It's easy to see why there might be some frustration there. It turns out to be a rest of the second period, though, that doesn't go much of anywhere for either team. It's kind of back and forth the rest of the way with some big hits, mostly the Wild laying the big hits and the Kraken absorbing them, although there was one hit on Shane Wright that he kind of gave it more back to the guy that laid the hit on him, or at least Wright didn't seem to get the worst of that hit. He got up with a smile on his face and kind of looked at the other guy who was also on the ice. Anyway, the Kraken do end up getting a power play late in the second period that doesn't go much of anywhere, so we get to a third period with the score still tied at 2. Oh, it did not stay tied at 2 for very long into the third period. Once again, it's the Wild getting on the board early in a second period in a row. This time it's Kirill Kaprizov with a beautiful tip as a puck gets fired through a bunch of traffic. I mean, it was very much an intentional look for that tip, but Kaprizov is able to reach his stick out past a couple of Kraken players and get just enough of it for it to go into the far corner past Decord. Not much Decord can do about it. He couldn't really see the shot coming in the first place, so not a lot he can do as far as reacting to that much of a redirect. And also just a great night all around for Kaprizov. He showed why he's the star of the Wild. He has obviously the assist early on, this goal, and I didn't mention it, but at the end of the first period on that power play that the Wild ended up scoring on at the beginning of the second period, but Kaprizov nearly had his first goal of the game right as the period came to an end. He had a wide open shot from a tight angle, but it was a good pass. He gets the shot off quickly, so not much of a chance for Decord. Luckily for the Kraken, at least at that point anyway, Kaprizov's shot did not beat the clock. They still did the whole celebration, even at the goal announcement and everything, but you could tell even as they were doing the celebrating behind the net that Kaprizov on his face didn't really think that he had beaten the horn, and sure enough, as you go to replay, it's pretty clear that he was about a half second late as far as when the puck crossed the line, so that wasn't a goal, but he does get a goal here early on in the third to give the Wild the 3-2 lead. Happily for the Kraken, though, just like with that goal early on in the second period for the Wild, this goal early on in the third period for the Wild is responded to quite quickly by the Kraken. 20 seconds longer than the goal in the second. It takes them a full minute, in fact a little bit past a full minute, to respond. But the Kraken hit down into the offensive end. It's a puck down to the corner being fought for by a few players. It's shoveled out into the crease, or not quite even into the crease, the low part of the face-off circle, where Ty Cartier is just in wide open space. He winds up and fires off an absolute bullet at the top corner of the net. Perfectly placed shot. Not much of a chance for Fleury in net. So Cartier finds the top corner of the near side, I'm pretty sure it was, over the shoulder of Fleury and past his ear to give the Kraken the third goal of the game, tie things back up at 3, with assists going to both Tanev and Gord. The fourth line getting on the board for the Kraken. Obviously for Cartier, his first of the season. Then off the ensuing faceoff, the Kraken get a couple more chances. Look like they're going to build some momentum, but that ends pretty quickly as the Wild turn things back in their direction. I mean, not as dominant as they were the back half of the first period, but it's clearly tilted a little bit more in the Wild direction, or I guess the ice would be tilted towards the Kraken. The Wild had possession advantage for the majority of the middle part of this third period, and eventually it ends up paying off for them. Once again, a bit of a defensive blunder by the Kraken. This time it's Boldy with an very nice pass, a highlight reel pass, as he spins behind his back and then just flicks a backhand pass out to the middle of the wide open ice, where Hartman is just standing there in the high slot to get the pass, fire off a quick shot to the other side of the net before Decord has much of a chance whatsoever to do anything about it. And not terribly unlike that first goal, though this time Hartman is even more wide open than Zuccarello was with that first goal. It's once again the Wild with the lead 4-3, and this is one where, unfortunately, I gotta say it's kind of more on Shane Wright than anybody else. He just gets sucked down into the play a little bit too much. There's already 2 defensemen that are covering the guys behind the net, and it's pretty much impossible to score from behind the net unless you're Trevor Zegras or Connor Bedard. I mean, there's some other guys that can do the Michigan, but the point is there's not a lot of guys that are going to score from behind the net, so you don't need a third player once 2 defensemen are already covering that to get that close. Unfortunately, Wright gets just a little bit too close and doesn't have the time to react to that spinning pass. Either way, a great play from Boldy, and otherwise Wright had a fine game. Just this one, yeah, it's one that he can learn from for sure, and the Wild have the lead. And it's a lead that with just 7 minutes left in the game, and especially with how good the Wild have been at maintaining possession through at least large chunks of this game anyway, I gotta admit I wasn't feeling terribly optimistic about Seattle's chances of coming back to at least tie this one and send it to overtime. I mean, you never know what's going to happen with the empty net, get an extra guy out on the ice. And sure enough, it turns out that's what the Kraken get, is an extra guy on the ice, though not because of the empty net, because of a delayed call for tripping or interference, as it's Montour, who had an incredible play, crashing the net, tries to shoot the puck between his legs, and for a second, a lot of people watching the TV broadcast, and even the guys doing the TV broadcast, thought that Montour had scored between his legs. Instead, it goes off the side of the net perfectly fine. It was just kind of a quick play. Montour goes flying. The Kraken end up getting the delayed call. They get possession of the puck. Extra guy out on the ice. And eventually, a couple of cycles later, it's Evans passing it down to the high face-off dot, or face-off circle, on the right side for Jared McCann, who winds up and fires an absolute bullet at the top corner and ties the game at 4. Just like the one with Cartier, it's a picture-perfect shot. In fact, even more so than the one with Cartier. There was not a very big window for McCann to put this into. I mean, the screenshot, it might be hard to tell. It'll certainly make that window look a little bit bigger, but from the perspective of where that puck was getting shot from, and not the perspective of way up in the rafters by where the cameras are, this is a very tight window. It might have grazed the shoulder of Fleury on the way by. Either way, Fleury has shots go past either of his ears to get the third and fourth goals for the Kraken in this game, both in the third period. McCann ties things for the Kraken, and with 3 minutes left, we wouldn't get too many more fireworks. Both teams got chances, but we end up going to overtime. And in overtime, well, no one ends up scoring since you already know this game goes to the shootout. It was a pretty entertaining overtime for one that didn't end in a score. It wasn't, I mean, there still was some of the whole possession thing, circling around with the puck, taking it back past the blue line so you maintain possession, but both teams got some pretty good chances. Matt Boldy very much should have ended the game at one point, and would have if it wasn't for Brandon Montour. And honestly, for me, that was the story of this overtime. Not just that one play, but another one after it, where Montour in 2 separate occasions saved this game for the Kraken defensively. I mean, he absolutely took the game-winning goal off of Boldy's stick the first time, and then certainly played a big role in another chance towards the net for a Wild player later on in the overtime period. So twice saved the Kraken defensively, and at the other end of the ice, he very nearly did it all after the second time he saved things defensively, took it down the other end, and just worked his way past everybody, nearly scored a couple of times, got a good shot off on Fleury, and then somehow, while going past it, was able to reach back and get a quick little shovel shot off that he just wasn't quite able to lift far enough off the ice to get it over Fleury's pad. But yeah, Montour all over the place, an absolute monster in this overtime period. After having a pretty good regulation of his own right, he has that assist, but honestly, beyond that assist and this overtime, Montour was just incredible in this game, and we certainly saw it, I think, mostly on display in the 3-on-3 overtime. Once again, though, it doesn't end up leading to a score for either team, so we go to the first shootout of the season. Shootout having never really been a strength for the Kraken, but you hardly would believe me if I told you the Kraken are perfect in this shootout, at least offensively. Decord does allow the first goal to Zuccarello, who started the scoring for the Wild. He scores with an absolutely nasty move to beat Decord the first time, but then the Kraken send out Bjorkstrand, who puts a pretty nice move and a good shot in the top corner to beat Fleury, and then Eberle, who goes out and also beats Fleury to get the morally finished hat trick. It's not actually a hat trick, but he scores 3 times in this game, so not a hat trick, but kind of a hat trick, right? The Kraken don't get a lot of hat tricks, so you gotta, we'll call it 2.5 goals for Eberle. Either way, the captain, after starting the scoring with the first 2 goals, finishes it for the Kraken as Decord makes one save back the other way, and then Boldy, who has the last chance for the Wild, puts it well above the net, misses the net completely. The Kraken come away with the victory, and yeah, leave a lot of Wild fans, I think, pretty upset after this game, and rightfully so. Though, really, I think more upset at the officials than anything else. Even with the win, though, I should mention real quick that it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the Kraken, as late in the third period, Dunn did get hit pretty hard into the boards by Foligno, and since he was already dealing with injuries, he went to the ice and took a bit to get up, did get to the bench, stayed on the bench for a little bit, but ended up leaving before overtime started. So, yeah, I can't imagine he's back for the second half of a back-to-back unless it was just something that he needed some extra time to shake off. Maybe he's back for the game in Dallas, but yeah, especially with the injuries he dealt with at the end of last season, you just got to hope that it wasn't a re-aggravation of those, especially with how long it took him to rehab whatever he had going on. That potential Dunn injury aside, though, all in all, this was a fantastic game, wildly entertaining for one thing, which is always good, but just, I mean, exactly the type of game that I think the Kraken fan base and the Kraken themselves really needed, not only to fight back from the multiple goal deficit to win a game, which they hadn't done in well over a year, but also to fight back multiple times in that third period to tie the game. So 3 times they were behind. They were behind 2-0. Obviously 2-1, but still behind at that point. They're down 2-0, come back to tie the game, then down 3-2, come back to tie it, down 3-4, come back to tie it, and then end up winning the game. Obviously, definitely puts the extra, I mean, it's always good to come back and at least get that extra point in the standings, but it still leaves a bit of a unfinished business type of feel. So for the Kraken to come back 3 times in this game and end up winning it, I think obviously great from a fan perspective, but especially for the team, really helps boost the confidence. And especially after, the point where they were down 2-0, they'd given up 5 straight goals at that point. After going up 2-0 in the game against the Blues, they gave up 3 straight to finish that game, and then gave up the first 2 of this one. So you give up 5 straight goals across 2 games, and then come back and score 4 of the next 6. Yeah, a good night for the Kraken, even if it could have been better. There were definitely some other parts of it that certainly helped the Kraken. Obviously, the horrendous call that led to the second goal for the Kraken on the power play. There was also a missed wraparound chance on what was basically an empty net in, I want to say, the second period for the Wild. Decord going a little bit too far out of his net, and should have been an easy wraparound, but the Wild player wrapped it into the post and the side of the net rather than into the gaping open net. So Kraken got lucky on a couple of different occasions, but hockey's hockey. For sure that the Kraken are going to get some bad calls go against them over the course of the season. Whenever the next horrendous call goes against the Kraken, we'll just have to remember that kind of evens things out a little bit for this one that happened in the middle of this game that helped the Kraken get to that second goal and tie the game there in the second period. Beyond that, since it is the first half of a back-to-back and we have another game, happening later today by the time you're seeing this video. We'll get to finishing things up with this one, starting with the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help influence who these 3 stars, help decide the 3 stars after every Kraken game, win or lose, you can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching at this point, which does help quite a bit by going over to Patreon through the link down below in the description and helping to support the channel over there. There's a lot of other fun things. There's some voting at the end of the season and stuff that's available on Patreon. Also a link down below to the shop, which is for the first 2 weeks, now about a week and a half, 25% off any Cheap Seats merch if you want that. That all aside, getting to the 3 stars, the first one is obvious. It's the captain, Jordan Eberle, with the first 2 goals in the game, and then obviously the deciding one there in the shootout, which doesn't count for anything on the stat sheet, but a fantastic night for Eberle and just that whole line in general. Shane Wright and Jared McCann played pretty well. In fact, we'll save McCann for later, but Wright played very well, aside from the one defensive blunder that led to the 4th goal for the Wild. Yeah, 4th goal for the Wild. Second star for me in this one, though, without question, it's got to be Brandon Montour. He gets his first Kraken point with the assist there, but just in general, Montour was the best player out on the ice for the Kraken. Regardless of points and goal scoring, Montour was all over the place and very much showed why the Kraken went out and got him in this free agency. He was fantastic, especially, again, shine above everyone else in that overtime period. And then with the 3rd star, I mean, there's a lot of guys you could give it to. The 4th line had a pretty good game. Gord had a great game. Cartier and Tanev had some ups and downs throughout the game, but Cartier had obviously a good game with the goal of his own. Matty had a pretty decent game after switching lines, but in the end, I got to go with Jared McCann. He has the game-tying goal that ends up sending this game to overtime, as well as the assist earlier on, and just in general, McCann continuing to show why he's, at least right now, the best forward on the team. But like I said, plenty of other options that you could have gone with in this one. Just a fantastic game. I think you maybe throw an honorary star to the official who called the tripping on Brodin. It feels a little bit, it doesn't feel great to say that, but he really did help the Kraken out quite a bit with that call. Yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments section below, who your 3 stars of the game would be for the Kraken. And until next time, which will be in about a day's time, obviously the Kraken playing in Dallas later tonight. Stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless, and go Kraken.